Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have Anna with TPUDC and Mr. Bill with TPUDC here tonight to present on the public draft of our new development code. This has been about a year-long process that we've engaged with the public last September to begin gaining understanding of what we would like to see. Ultimately, a client draft came out earlier this year. My staff reviewed the client draft. We met with our development code committee. We reviewed it as a committee, gave back formal comments to our consultant. They've taken all of our comments in and have put together the public draft and their presentation tonight. From here on out, after tonight, the public draft will be available on the city website. It'll be available within the next 24 hours on the city website as a PDF download. There will also be a zoning map document that you can download as well as a draft zoning map. There should be a banner that rolls across the front page of the city website to direct everyone to the appropriate web page of where you can find those documents. There will be a 30-day public comment period starting tomorrow through September 14th. There are 3 different ways to be able to give comments. You can send a letter in the mail to City Hall at 7100 City Center Way, Fairview, Tennessee. You can come and visit our office. The Planning and Codes Department is located at 7111 Bowie Lake Road. Or on our website, there will be a link to send myself an email, egreer@fairview-tn.org. With that, I will turn it over to TPUDC to give us their public draft presentation.
Hello. Thank you all for coming. So we are going to go ahead and jump right in, and we'll start just with a very, very quick overview of what zoning actually is. You might recognize some of these slides if you were participating in things from a year ago, but just as a reminder, zoning implements the vision of the comprehensive plan, which you had adopted several years ago. It groups land into different areas or zones, and it contains rules about what you can do or not do in each zone. It does not cause anything to be built. It just permits and limits what you can build in each district. And thankfully, if you want to create a complete community, zoning is a great tool to be able to do that. So some of the things that we heard from the city over the public outreach process were that they wanted walkable, compact and mixed use and diverse neighborhoods. So this is a great way to implement that. Kind of a quick refresher of the process, which Ethan already did, but we started with reviewing your background documents. So we looked at your existing zoning ordinance, your comprehensive plan, and some other planning documents. Next, we had some conversations and interviews with public officials from Planning Commission and the BOC, and then we also talked a lot with planning staff about what works and what doesn't work with your current ordinance. Ethan gave us a tour of Fairview back in September of last year, and so it was really helpful for us to see what development people like and what people don't like. We provided opportunities for engagement with the public, which I'll get into in a minute, and then, as Ethan said, we created the client draft. We submitted it to him and his staff. They reviewed it over a period of a few months, and then they gave us updates to implement and create the public draft. So back in September of last year, we started with a community kickoff right in this room. And then we did a Codapalooza, which is a multi-day event. We had some topical meetings, some presentations, mapping workshop, just to really get the public involved and hear what all they had to say. Just a quick summary of the public input. The red is areas where people may have had some concerns or there's problems. Blue is places of opportunity that people identified, and then green is places that people love. So kind of high level what we heard, tree preservation was huge. It's something that we heard a lot. People like a mix of housing types and sizes and prices, considering this is Middle Tennessee and it's quite unaffordable. Everybody obviously loves Bowie Nature Park and they want to protect that. Traffic is a big issue, and so trying to find alternative road networks to kind of mitigate that traffic. Better signage was something we heard. Streets that accommodate biking and walking. Identifiable character that blends into what Williamson County currently has. Screening your decentralized sewer systems was something we heard a lot. And then working with infrastructure and the topography to create development that's kind of built around those constraints.
We're going to have just a back and forth, hop up and down kind of thing here going for the parts that Anna's most expert in, she does, and the things that I'm most expert in, I try to do. So this is just a table of contents of the public draft. It's short in terms of its numbers of articles, but it's a comprehensive document. It's got. We're just going to step through, I guess, each of the articles. Where's your? Thank you. So Article 1 is, I call it the housekeeping article. It's got a number of things in it, but it sets up the intent of the code, talks about the relationship it has to other city ordinances. It talks about nonconformities, which is when you change a zoning code, everything is permitted to stay just like it is, unless you make a substantial change to it of some kind. And it's there's a state statute that controls all that, but it's reflected in here as well. Transition rules, which is where somebody, if they've already filed an application, they're allowed to go under the old law as opposed to the new law, even though if the new law's been adopted. They also have the choice to go under the new one if they want to, but it just creates a smoother move between the two zoning ordinances. Talks about vested property rights. So if you've had a project that's been submitted under the old document, and it was a complete and compliant application, then you have vested property rights. It means you get rights from having done that, so that if somewhere down the road or even from you don't have to follow this zoning ordinance if you have those older vested property rights. Let's see. The second article just talks about basically how the zoning map is put together and what's got to be in it, and the city maintains it and where you can locate it. There's a concept called special requirements, which is within any zoning district, if there are particular places within that district that you want to say allow or encourage, like a taller height or a shorter height than what the district would otherwise call for. That's what a special requirement's for, not just heights, but like whether it's going to be a shop front frontage as opposed to like an office front frontage, or anything to that effect. And this also talks about the zoning that's applicable to a newly annexed property. Third article it talks all about the various zoning districts are established, as well as the overlay districts. There will be certain districts that are available like today that will not be available in the future, particularly with respect to planned unit developments. Any planned unit development that's established or already been approved, it stays a planned unit development under its old approval. But there won't be a process going forward for new planned unit developments. And we do that because the way the code's written, it's a more precise way and a better way to regulate planned developments. All developments ought to be planned. It's like there ought to be something that governs what you're going to be developing, and that's what the whole code does it. So to have a different setup for PUDs would be redundant. There are 2 overlay districts that are provided for in the document. y'all already have them in place, but they're the historic and landmark overlay district, and then the floodplain overlay district. And they have regulations that are specific to their topics. Just running through the different districts, this is all set up on a continuum of places, so that some people call it a transect, some people may call it something else, but it basically runs from the most rural to the most urban place in Fairview, not the most urban place in the world, but the calibrated to Fairview. So like, y'all don't have anything that would be like New York City, you don't have anything that would be quite that tall here. So the first district, CD1 natural, it literally is natural land. It's, there typically aren't any buildings there. It's typically preserved. I'm going to say the word wrong, I know. The Bowie Park, it's Bowie, I hit it right the first time, is natural land. And so that's a good representation of what CD1 is. Some cities don't have any CD1 left. They just, everything's developed. And, but y'all got quite an asset with that. CD2 is the rural district, and it's basically farmland, and it may also have really low density single family residential detached. But these are the images that you're seeing are pretty good representations of kind of what the character of each of these is. CD2W woodlot. This is something we actually created just for Fairview. We noticed that there are an awful lot of rural homes that are surrounded by woods and actually have woods between them and the roads. And we saw it as being, that's quite a precedent here, and that it's something that it makes it, when you're coming in, it makes it really seem like you're in a natural area. And so you're just driving through all those trees, you got no idea the houses are back there. And so we created that district for Fairview. The CD3L neighborhood large lot, it's low density single family houses on larger lots. It has, the front setbacks are medium to deep. There are streets that have curbs and sidewalks and may have street trees. And the blocks are medium to large size. The importance of how big a block is how it connects exactly to how walkable a place is. If you got monster blocks, the place starts being not walkable. 3L is probably the least welcome. Well, some of the 2s are also not walkable. They're not intended to be. They're like huge parcels of land. And so, but CD3L it's not intended to be perfectly walkable, so much so as the other districts that are coming. CD3 neighborhood is, again, low density. It has smaller lots. The setbacks are medium to deep, but you notice the houses are a little bit closer together. They are a little bit closer to the street. And again, they have medium to large size blocks. And when we say large block, we don't mean huge blocks. We mean still very walkable size. CD4 neighborhood center, you start having a mix of building types and a mix of uses in CD4. It's you can have some single family residential in it. It's probably not going to be that much. Multifamily residential, townhouses, some shops. This is kind of the transition between single family residential and a more urban area. It's also because it's a transitional area, it's kind of the most interesting sort of place to be, as opposed to things that are more single use. CD4C is for neighborhood corridor. There are places up and down Fairview that along the corridor that that have like if you get down into particularly down where am I standing? Is that if you start getting down to where the bigger boxes are down here, that's kind of the corridor. But the corridor is going to be it'll be an improved version of the big box corridors, so that that they each will start feeling like and this isn't saying somebody's never going to build this, but like if they may build like shops and whatnot that start defining the space around them, rather than just being a humongous big box with humongous, I use that word 6 times today already. It's large. It's just a large place. Rather than just being large parking lots and large buildings. And if you can ever get one that is designed anywhere close to this, that's what you would want to jump on that. That's like this is about as good as this type of development gets. And then there's the CDCV. CD stands for Character District, by the way. CDCV Civic, and that's it's designated for civic purposes like your parks and that sort of open space, and also things that are significant buildings that are useful for government purpose and public purposes like libraries and whatnot. There are 2 special districts. There's a light industrial district, which is it's industrial, but it's very light industrial, so that it's not one that has smoke puffing out of it all the time. It's just a very it's things like small distribution warehouses, that kind of thing. You also have a heavy industrial district. I don't know if do we map any heavy? We haven't mapped any heavy industrial, and so it'd be kind of just like a placeholder if some opportunity came to the city that they want to consider it. Then the 2 overlays, the Historic and Landmark Overlay District, it's intended to preserve historic and architectural features and places, and y'all kind of know what they are. I know they're. I'm always confused when I see them on your map because they have names that make them sound like they would have been further up the road, but it's because they've been moved. And I thought that was curious that they have a sort of a neighborhood name that would put them down that way, but they're like right down here, I think. Am I about right where I'm pointing out the window? And then the floodplain district is it covers everywhere that's subject to flooding, and it pretty well tracks the FEMA regulations for communities that have flood insurance, and everywhere around Middle Tennessee, there's some little place that might flood sometime. And the storm we had around my house last night filled up the creeks pretty quick. So this is yours.
Okay, so now we're getting into Article 4, and Article 4 is really like the heart of this document. It's the largest article, and it has a lot of information, but it's pretty user-friendly. So Article 4, we call, there's this idea of multi-page tables, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, but there's one for every district that Bill just walked you through. And each of those tables is kind of like a quick reference of, if I'm in this district, what are the setbacks and what are the lot standards and where does my parking need to go and that kind of thing. So I'm going to just walk through an example of one. This is CD4, so that kind of mixed use district. But I've got some spreads of each one in CD4, so you can kind of see what it looks like. But you've got your rendering, and then there's a description of the actual district. And then, I know it's small on the screen, but on the right side, you've got what the density is for the district, the block size. Bill talked about blocks being important to the walkability of the area. So you can see what the perimeter of the block can be at max. Private frontage types, which I'll get into, same with civic space types. a quick reference to where your uses are, number of buildings on a lot. The width of a lot is really important here. So one of the things that we probably should have said earlier is this code is largely focused around what people view from the street, like from the pedestrian experience. So when you're looking at a building while you're standing on the sidewalk or the street, what do you feel? What is that character? So lot width is a really important aspect of that. And your lot widths are variable depending on what district you're in. And then same with setbacks. So those are going to be different depending on what district you're in. Building standards. So this is where you see how tall you can get up to as far as stories. Facade standards. So this is more of the architectural stuff that we've incorporated. And it's really simple architectural stuff. It's nothing crazy, but just is good design. Roof type and pitch, building materials, most of which are permitted, but there's certain ones that we steered away from here, mostly just because they wouldn't fit the character of Fairview. Building types, again, I'll get into parking requirements, where your garage should be, where the driveway should be, where if you can have on-street parking or not. Loading and access, so if you're in a commercial area where your loading needs to be, and then some random non-building components such as HVAC and animal enclosures, swimming pools, that kind of thing, regulating where those can be on your lot. Quick reference to signs, which is a whole other article. Lighting, private landscaping. They're nothing crazy, but just is important to developing the character of the area. And then screens and street screens. So this is just a quick reference of what some of our graphics look like as far as what a lot is, or a building site, which is used pretty interchangeably, and they should be developed in the same way. Do you want to explain lots versus building sites, or are we?
Let's get digging for
Yeah. Okay. We'll skip it for now.
We could probably answer questions about it after they've had a chance to look at the code probably.
So frontage types, again, this is the idea of if you're standing on the street or the sidewalk, what are you looking at? And so we have a variety of frontage types. As Bill mentioned, the idea of the most rural character to the most urban for Fairview. So you'll see a common theme of like the most rural is at the top, and then you get down to the most urban. So for Fairview, the frontage types that we feel like would be appropriate, there's your common yard, a porch, a fence, a terrace or a light well, a forecourt, a stoop, a step front, a shop front, a gallery, and an office front. And these are all explained in the document. There's a page for each one and just some examples of photos of different places that incorporate these well. And it also includes what districts that specific frontage type is allowed in. Same with building types. So you've got your most rural, which is a house, and then you go all the way up to your most urban, which is, I guess, like a mixed-use building, and then you've got some miscellaneous ones, such as a flex building, which is kind of industrial, or could be adaptive reuse. Large-scale commercial is like your big box, and then civic buildings, so kind of work your way up, and then descriptions of each one, the type of metrics that may be applied to that specific building type are also in there. Uses, there's a table for 3 different types of uses. So you've got principal uses, which is the primary use on your lot or building site, and then accessory uses, which may be like ancillary or accessory to your principal use, and then temporary uses. So there's a table for each one. Principal uses are the biggest table, and they're divided into categories. So you've got residential uses, commercial, civic, down the line to industrial. There's several different permissions. So permitted by right is if that's allowed in that district, you can do it. Conditional use means there's conditions attached to it, and that would go to BOZA, and they would have to approve that use. Permitted subject to limited use standards. It's a mouthful, but basically it's permitted if you meet certain requirements. It's not like you have to go to BOZA for those. And then not permitted, or as we talked about with the approved PUDs and PODs, pods, we're just calling them existing plan districts. So if you're approved for use of that, then you still refer to that, that approved plan. Also in Article 4, we talk about lot and building site and parcel buffers. So just buffering your specific lot, and that really only matters if you're a property that's abutting this CD4C. So if you have a big box, you probably want to buffer against that, or if you have an industrial property as well, and if you're abutting one. Parking requirements. So there's a parking table that mirrors all the uses in the uses table and the parking requirements that are allowed for each one. It's pretty straightforward. And then there's also like dimensions of parking spaces and where drive-throughs can go, stacking spaces, which is basically the cars that are in the line of the drive-through, how long that should be, bicycle parking, where your loading space should go. A lot of it is locationally where things need to go on the lot. And then I think, the last one in Article 4 is private landscape standards. So these were previously mentioned in the multi-page tables. So it talks about maintenance of plants and landscaping, removal. We talk about native plants to Middle Tennessee and those that are approved to be used in this area. We don't want invasive species or anything like that. And then specifically, again, where they should go on the lot.
Okay, like Anna said, that was, Article 4 covers most of the standards that most people use most of the time. If you are developing a larger site, there are some additional considerations that get regulated, and we call these larger sites are called development sites, as opposed to just lots. Let's see. Within a development site, there's a requirement that you design it based on the typical distance a person is willing to walk within about 15 minutes. And that's a 1/4 mile radius. And so that's basically a pedestrian shed typically has at its center some sort of key gathering space or a shopping area or something to center it around. This one right here that's shown in the illustration it happens to be at a shopping node. But a lot of times they're like major parks that are the center of the ped shed. There are provisions that if you have a bigger development that there be a mix of certain building types and of certain uses. If you're in, they're not really applicable except in the CD4 and the CD4C. And what we are trying to accomplish by doing that is to make sure there's not an overbuilding of, say, multifamily in an area where there ought to be some multifamily and some other mix of uses to make a place as opposed to making an apartment complex. Same thing goes for CD4 and CD4C are also regulated by what percentage is a maximum residential percentage. And it doesn't require a tremendous amount of mixed use. You just don't want it to become the predominant thing that is your neighborhood general district. There are provisions for the larger development sites for different street types, and again, they are permitted on a continuum of the most rural places to the most urban places, because a country road, even though you've got a country road that's like a major thing out here, typically you would in a different world you would want that to be a little bit able to handle more volume than it's able to handle right this second. But it's a beautiful road, and it ends up making one of the things that makes this place have the character that it does, and so good for it. But different street types, roads, that's typically in a rural situation. Neighborhood streets, those typically run through what you think of as a neighborhood. Drives are like, they may have a neighborhood on one side and a park space on the other side. And then commercial streets, and I don't know, do we have any commercial streets, you think, here already? I don't know, maybe out by the interstate, maybe. But also governs alleys. We already talked about the importance of block perimeters and how big blocks are, and then bikeway types. Covers public planning that lets the developer know, what different types of trees can be in what district. They also tend to, different patterns of planning tend to create a more rural versus a more urban place, whether they're lined up in a straight row or whether they're kind of opportunistically placed to be more natural or more rural. And then also the different types of lighting fixtures that can be used. This is, again, there's a requirement that for certain sizes of development sites that there be open space provided within the development. And in addition to there being a certain percentage, they also are provided by way of what types of different civic spaces are more rural to more urban. If you have a natural area, that's way over in I told you all about CD1 natural, that's way over here in not even rural, it's like not developed. But then as you move up the transect or the context continuum, they tend to be, there's a type, it's not shown on this particular slide, a green is a fairly suburban rural type, and then as you move on up, a square, and there's a picture of a square here, and you start seeing how more formalized that is from something that might just be a green. And a plaza is even more formal than that, is they're typically mostly hardscaped as opposed to planted. Playgrounds are loved and are allowed pretty much everywhere. Sports fields, they tend to be better off if you get them out a little bit away from the more urban areas because they take up so much space, but they're allowed across a pretty wide range of different places. Community gardens, and then pocket parks. Pocket parks just a very small park. There are provisions in here for the density of each district, and they run from what's very rural to what for Fairview is urban. And 8 dwelling units per acre is not very urban. Let's see. You hit project buffers a minute ago. We're still sorting through, even right before we drove over here, whether all buffers need to go in one place or do some of them need to go in Article 5 and some of them in Article 4, and that one thing's a little bit in flux about where they go. But this is another concept that we think may be really helpful for Fairview to keep the kind of the country rural feeling as you're coming down the road intact, is to possibly designate, and this is not something that's like set up already, but the mechanism is set up in this document, to actually have a scenic street setback and buffer so that it creates something very similar to what I was talking about, the woodlot frontage. It's not as dense, but you just push the development back a little bit, and it creates a much more scenic thing along the road. City of Franklin has these, and in some places it's the reason that that Franklin is retaining some of its charm, even though it's under such development pressure. And this is just an illustration of it. Article 6 is, to me, it's the parts that they don't excite me quite as much as the rest of the code does. Some people say that there's nothing exciting about what a zoning code does, but some of it's more interesting to me than other parts. But it covers things like streetscape repairs, like if somebody is building and they tear up the frontage where the city has put street trees, for instance, they're going to need to fix them back. Covers fire safety, circulation of traffic, when traffic impact studies are required. It requires underground utilities in new development, different natural and historic features. That covers things like tree preservation. No, I see it now. It's listed down further. It covers things like steep slopes and protecting them. And I think I've already got some slope provisions. This tends to refine it a little bit. One of the things I lived in Birmingham, Alabama before I moved up here about a dozen years ago. One of the things that impressed me the most was the hilltops all around, lots of them in Williamson County, particularly in Franklin, that they're not going to let somebody touch the top of a hilltop. In Birmingham, it's a little bit more mountainous than it is here, and developers would frequently come in and we're talking about the tallest mountain in Jefferson County in Alabama, take the entire top off of it. And it's just, you've lost that hilltop's gone forever when you do that. Now, there's some great views from up there, and there's some beautiful houses that they put up there. But if you realize what a treasure the hilltops around here are, it's a great thing. We got tree preservation provisions. Let's see, erosion control stuff. A lot of these types of things were brought forward from your existing document because it's kind of engineering driven, and people have thought about all that stuff pretty well before we got here. So they've just been brought forward. Your time.
So Article 7 is signs. And as I mentioned earlier, we heard a lot about wanting better signage in Fairview. So there's quite a few types, starting from an address, which isn't really regulated on your building, but then you go into awnings, band signs, blade signs, all the way up to window signs. And so there are specific metrics that apply to these and districts that these should go into, but it should be a lot more objective standards going forward instead of planning staff maybe having to, figure out, is the sign going to, be approved or not? So it just kind of gives you a menu of different sign options. And there's a spread for each type and a model so you can see what that might look like.
And you talk about a part that's not all that thrilling. That's the administration and procedures article. This basically sets up who the review and decision-making authorities are for each type of submission that might be made under the zoning code, the different types of applications that are required, and the procedures that are applicable to each of them. The biggest thing that is covered in this article is a development plan review, and there are a couple of different types of development plan. There's a plot development plan, which is required when you're doing single family or a duplex. And then there is a site development plan, which is more if you're doing something more than one single family development, one single family home or a duplex that you have to comply with to do the development. There are a bunch of other permits. There are things that are really important, but things that they're not things that pop up all the time, and they're all listed here. there are two different historic district applications. One being to get a new place designated as a historic district. Another one being you're in a historic district and you have to get a certification that what you're doing is appropriate for it. Conditional uses and permits and variances, those are the things that the Board of Zoning Appeals handles. Appeals of any administrative decisions, they also go to BOZA. Rezoning, that's something that happens from time to time, probably not as often as development plans getting reviewed. And then he comes all the way down to like subdivision plats and whatnot. One thing in this that I find useful in a zoning ordinance is we've got some tables that there's another table that we didn't put an image of in here that it basically is a grid that shows what type of application is approved by what authorities, who reviews it first, then who has to approve it, and then who it's appealed to. And it summarizes what is pages and pages of procedural stuff that I just find it really handy to have it in that short-handed form. This one up here right behind me is which things require hearings. Again, if you don't have something like this, it's easy to look at. You have to really look to find, okay, and then you have to have a public hearing all in for the procedure of that particular type of application. On the right here is a flow chart. It's also really helpful to just understand the development plan review process, and every step of it's laid out here. I wish I could lay out a flow chart for the entirety of every procedure. And I set out one time to start trying to do that, and I realized that by the time I got to the end of it, I'd have a flow chart that's about as big as this wall, and it's like it'd be a huge spider web. No, if you got this, go there, and it's just like. And so, I gave up. I knew I wouldn't have a piece of paper big enough, and so, but the development plan review is the key one, and so that's why we still have that piece of it. You go ahead and do that.
Last article. So this is definitions. It's the last one in the document, but it is important, and it should be pretty user-friendly. It's got a lot of graphics, as you can see, but the idea is that any term or any word in the document that starts with a capital letter is defined. So if you're going through this review and you see a word that is capitalized and you don't see it defined, let us know, because it should be, or it's just a proper noun. But it's alphabetical, and it's got a lot of references to other places in the document, but it is an important article. So, and then lastly, here's your zoning map. Don't worry, this will also be online for you to review. And I know it's really small to look at here, but you'll have plenty of time to look at it. I do want to note one thing, and I don't know if you can see it, but those red lines that run along, there's a few of them, Fairview Boulevard and 96. That's a really good example of that special requirement that Bill was talking about earlier with Article 2? 3? 3. So the idea is that those have a certain height limit, and I believe it's 2 stories. It's hard to read here, but this follows what your comprehensive plan says right now with the future land uses. There are certain future land uses that are more commercial, but like a rural commercial. So we didn't want to get too high as you're, driving down these specific corridors. So that's important, and it's something that can be changed if you feel like maybe that's not appropriate, or you can apply them somewhere else if you think that might be helpful. As Ethan said, the draft and the map will be posted tomorrow online, so it'll be on the city's Planning and Codes Department webpage. You can submit your comments to him. There's his email right there, egreer@fairview-tn.org. And he also said you can come in person to their office and talk about it or mail a letter to City Hall. So staff over the next 30 days will be taking in all of your comments and they'll compile them. And then after September 14th, they will send them back to us. And then after that, we will incorporate those into the final draft, which hopefully will get adopted. It will get adopted. So here's just a quick project timeline of where we've been. We started with the kickoff, and then we did the Codapalooza, and then we drafted, and now we're here at the public draft presentation. So I believe that's everything. And now we'll sit here and answer questions as long as you want. I know it's a lot of information, but we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
You didn't touch on food trucks or billboards or anything like that?
The sign for, I can't remember whether we had billboards talked about in the sign provisions. There's a federal statute that governs a lot of that. And if we didn't include that about billboards, we can easily. Food trucks, there is also a state statute, that's right.
I'm just going to reiterate my question so that it's recorded as well.
There you go.
Just, my question was in regards to billboards and food trucks.
Yep.
What were part of the ordinances for that?
Yep. I don't remember food trucks as being a use or not.
Food trucks, I believe, are use, but I think it refers to the city's code, because I want to say there are standards in that. So it is a use, and we talk about where it's permitted. But I think it just kicks over to what the city already has as far as regulations for food trucks.
So on the, and like I saying, on the billboards, there's a federal statute that governs billboards. There's also a state statute that feeds into the federal one, and Anna said we have referred to that statute for purposes of billboard regulation.
Hi. I was in Brentwood today,
Hey.
and I was driving through a section I've not been through in a while, and the old Steinmart store was there with the Chick-fil-A, and I'm driving through that area, and I noticed Steinmart's been ripped up, and the sign on it says paddleball courts and lounge. So
Whatever that is.
something that's going from shopping to paddleball courts and lounge. I assume that's addressed in your section 8 up there.
I'm not sure
If somebody came to town and wanted to do something like that, is my question.
all right, if it's not in the use table, it's not permitted. That's one thing to know. And if it is permitted in the use table, it's either permitted just by right or by BOZO approval or with some special conditions attached to it. A lot of the things in the use table are done categorically so that might be shown as a recreational use or something like that. I don't remember anything that particularly says pickleball courts right this second or paddleball courts or lounges probably are addressed. I can't remember. And I apologize for not being able to just tell you like that, but we are in the middle of 3 codes right this second, and I do know that one of them, in fact, the city did not want us regulating alcoholic beverage establishments at all. And I think it was not this one.
Correct.
Yep, okay. So alcoholic beverage establishments are in there, and you can see where they're allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the same examples. We had dirt cheap, and then somebody came in and made it indoor storage. I don't know if the city decides.
I can just barely hear you.
Okay, so we had a dirt cheap here to go
Okay.
along with what she's saying.
Okay.
And they turned it into indoor storage.
Okay.
So really, if somebody owns that, unless they do something really strange, I don't think the city really decides that, right?
I don't think that a shift from that to indoor storage is an equivalent use. And if it and Ethan's gonna take it, he knows what you're talking about.
I'll help you, Ms. Cook, on that one. So in that particular case, with how this ordinance is written, it has storage units as a use within the light industrial zone. That building today is zoned commercial general. Today in our current ordinance, self-storage and indoor storage is within commercial general. In this draft, we have removed that from commercial general and moved it into a light industrial use. And so that case would not happen if this code were to be adopted. Kind of looking at uses across the board, we tried to make sure that anything that truly fell into commercial stayed in a commercial use. Anything that was slightly in industrial moved into the light industrial uses. Anything that's heavy industrial moved into heavy industrial. So I know that's a great case point there about dirt cheap moving into storage. And so
used to be able to do it, that's what the law is right now, until this is adopted then.
What's the procedure for plan review? Does it go through our city, or does it go through an outside vendor first before it goes to the city?
Right this second, it is set up for it to, it comes to Ethan for pre-review, then it goes to the plan. Some plans would just be approvable by Ethan, things that are plot plans for more simple projects. Site development plans are approvable by the Planning Commission after they've cleared Ethan's office.
Does anything go through TPUDC?
No. Not unless you want it to.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Are there any cities, municipalities near us within a certain distance or anything that you could point to that have very similar code structure that they've used over a period of time now?
Used over a period of time. Franklin's code, it is not based on the transect, but it's the things that are required in it are very similar to what's required here. Now, that said, Franklin's standards are very rigorous, very, very rigorous, and prescriptive. And the standards that are in this code are not always as rigorous as Franklin's are. But Columbia's been doing, they've been working under a form-based code like this, for what?
3 or 4 years?
Longer than that. Probably 5 or 6 years, I would think. Nolensville has one. Gallatin is one of the ones we're currently working on. And then you guys, we've also done them all across the country, in addition to what we've done in Middle Tennessee.
Hi, just a quick question. You had a map up there that had different colors. Could you just go over that really high level just to say what the colors mean?
Yeah.
Yes, that
Go
one.
for it.
Thank
I
you.
can't see that.
Yeah, it'll have to partially be from memory. So anything that is in that golden yellow color is a planned development that was approved prior to this ordinance. So those remain vested. We're not touching those. Anything that is pink is that CDCV or civic. So actually Bowie Park is civic, but it could pretty much, and we only did that because it's owned by the city, but it could be CD1 as well. Anything that is the lighter green is rural, so CD2. Darker green is 2W, so that woodlot district. Thank you. Anything in that kind of tannish beige color is 3L, so that's neighborhood large lot, which is a majority of what you currently have, and that's okay. The lighter purple is CD3 neighborhood, and then kind of the medium purple is CD4, so that's your neighborhood center. 4C is the neighborhood corridor, and that one is the darker purple, and it's actually really only by the interstate up there. Pretty much all the corridor stuff that we have along Fairview Boulevard, we've turned into CD4 because it could be something really great in the future. And then lastly is the light gray, and that is light industrial. And then we don't have any heavy industrial, which would probably be like a darker gray if it was on there.
And Ethan just showed us that, like, you can really see the legend if you have it on your computer as opposed to what we see over here, which is tiny.
If I may ask, how does this affect, or does it affect, any and all of the building that's going on in town already? Because you go up and down 100, you go up and down 96, there's developments, they're building on postage stamps.
It does not affect that.
So this is strictly future, and anything that's already has building permits accepted is staying the way it is.
That's correct. That's correct. And that goes back to the quick mention I made of vested rights in the state of Tennessee. State statute says if you're there, you got it done, you're vested, and that's what you got.
Can we get a better clarification on the rural part? The rural part?
The rules part?
The rural.
Rural part.
Yes, as far as if it's taking away the agriculture with it being rural, we need to know if farms are still protected under the 2015 Act and if they're protected under the Bill Lee Act.
The district that is applied to the rural areas, if you have to find them on the map, but and I don't know which ones are farmland and which ones are not without digging down a little bit. But if it's zoned CD2 rural, it's primarily agricultural land, and it may have low density single family on it. And what typically is a rural site to me is it's got some farm, it's got the farmer's house, and and some farm buildings. That's essentially the nature of CD2.
I also forgot to mention we have agricultural uses in the table, and I believe they're all permitted in CD2. And then we refer also to the state statute as far as protection of agricultural land.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Back to the previous slide where we were just looking with the color coding, were those codes determined by the roadways? Were they determined by the 2040 plan? What went into how these were mapped out?
It's a combination of things. So we definitely look at the future land use plan because it's a really great plan and it's adopted. So ideally that should kind of form your zoning map. So we looked at that. We looked at your current zoning. So one thing we'll do at the beginning is a zoning translation. So for instance, anything that's AR-15A or AR-5A generally has been translated into the CD2. And then Ethan's got a table, and we could put that online if you wanted to, of what the old district is and what your new district would be. So we'll look at what's mapped and what's currently there and see if it makes sense, and if it doesn't, we may fix it. But Ethan also made comments on this, and we adjusted them based on what he said. So this doesn't mean it's set in stone, and you can all comment on this, but this is kind of it's like our second take at the zoning map.
Essentially, we took the uses that exist on the land today, if it's a home or a business or whatever, and matched it up to what that would be in the new document. So if you have a home and you have over 2 acres, CD2 is kind of where that falls. If you have a home and you're on a half-acre lot, that is CD3L. If you have a home and you're on a quarter-acre lot, that's CD3. Kind of everything transitioned over into as close to what it could match to. So this only affects properties that are currently within the city of Fairview, within the municipal boundary. And so most of our properties within the city of Fairview are currently zoned RS40. RS40, anything that gets annexed comes in as RS40. Everything that, generally speaking, most of it is RS40, which is 1 home per acre. That all mostly transitioned over to CD3L. Some of it transitioned over to CD2W if you had a larger lot, if you had more than an acre. I did take them on a pretty extensive ride through Fairview to look at homes and drive down roads and kind of help map out, down Dice Lampley, you have a lot of houses that sit farther off the road that have a very wooded lot. Those are more in the CD2W range versus Castleberry. It has half-acre lots, and those fall within the CD3L character district. And so there's a lot of time put into mapping exactly what it's zoned today so that residents are not losing any property rights that they currently have today. They're maintaining what they have. It may be called something different and have a couple additional rights and regulations with it. There may be some slight variations, like the commercial general piece that we talked about earlier and some of the uses that are available in there. But overall, generally speaking, everything is matched as closely as possible to the rights and privileges that the citizens have today.
I have I guess, two-part question, 2 in 1. When looking at open space and the different uses, whether it be single-family residential, the mixed use, the commercial heavy uses, can you go over the minimums of what the open space will look like for those if they're set out? And then kind of tied with that, have we looked at the greenway potential within town and how to incorporate greenways within these open spaces to start tying developments together with multi-use paths?
You do that.
I can answer the second half of that question. I think Ethan is looking up the first.
It's maybe 5%.
But as far as greenways, I do know that we reference a greenway plan, and I remember asking Ethan, do you have one? And he said no, but we're looking into one. So he said keep that, and that'll be a reference in the future for where greenways should go. We typically don't get as deep into greenways because they're not
Listen, it's
they're not lots.
particularly if they're not there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't zone to it necessarily.
Yeah.
Your minimum percentage of civic space in a development.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The minimum percentage development space in civic space in a development site is 5%. It can go up to 20%. So it's not huge. But there are a lot of other things that you can do in a code to, encourage more of that if that's what you're looking to do, as opposed to sort of what the typical amount is. But again, every time you do civic space, it's got to be useful civic space. It's not throwaway space. It's not where your stormwater goes. It's not. It's a real place where people can gather and do things that you do in civic space. So.
Can't hear. The conversion chart, RS40 equals whatever. Would it be okay to call it an addendum and put it at the back of this? So it'd all be in one place?
I wouldn't recommend putting conversion. The old code's gone when this one's approved, literally gone.
Yep, hang on, Bill.
There you go. I'm sorry. I thought I could hear myself back there. The old code's gone, so to put that in there would confuse things that were going on. But having it as a reference point now as it's going through the adoption process is probably a useful thing. I think Ethan said we could make that available. So.
I just like things together, but I,
We'll explain a little bit more on the conversion from the traditional RS 4020 to this new CD character district, the reasoning behind that conversion?
Essentially, your districts right now are set up by what uses can happen there, and by how much density can go there. And it's like the only consideration, period. A character-based code is set up so that it's focused on uses, and it has density and uses, but it's also focused on creating a place that either preserves or creates character. The existing code doesn't have the ability to do that at all. Character-based codes are set up so that the standards in them are objective as opposed to discretionary. And when you have a code, what we call a conventional code, based on uses and density, and you have a couple of setback requirements, and that's about where you go, maybe a height requirement, you end up with any number of outcomes. It can go all over the place. And this is trying to create a more predictable experience for the developer and for the citizens in the city for what's going to be put on or within a development.
I guess in conjunction with this young lady's question back here about her farm and the fact that a lot of the Williamson County unincorporated land abuts Fairview, what have you done as far as transition?
Transition between the two? Between
all
Williamson
the
County and
all
Fairview?
the unincorporated
Yep.
parts of Williamson County require 5-acre lots.
Yep.
So what have you done to transition, or what are you doing to abut those areas?
Well, the idea out here, I think, is to have a pattern that goes rural, which would be a very lightly developed or not developed place, and then it'd be like segment of rural, segment of country. I mean, segment of town. And that if you drive down Fairview Boulevard, there are a number of places where you see that. Every one of the old existing kind of crossroads have kind of a node of development there, and then it kind of goes back into a more rural feel. But at the edges of town, we're not able to regulate what's happening in Williamson County, but you are able to regulate what happens in Fairview. So we've tried to keep as much as we can the status quo of kind of what the district is now, what the densities are, and we've tried to match up with those. But there's not anything particular that is a transition thing, because you'd be, if you're talking about like a buffer or something like that, it'd be like you'd be buffering the whole city away from the county, and that's probably not a good development idea either.
Right here. Any guidance in the plan for future possible annexations?
They're just annexation provisions in it. I guess the comp plan probably has some consideration of annexation in it. There's a what? The growth boundary. It's set up so that it contemplates where annexation may go. The growth boundary comes out of the comp plan. But as far as this code goes, it just says if you're going to annex, here's what you got to do, and that it'll come in as what is it, R2? Yeah, not R2, but CD2, yeah.
Before we take another question, Mr. Sullivan, to answer your question, any development site of 20 acres or more shall include at least 5%, but not more than 20% of its gross acreage assigned as civic space, which is slightly different than open space. I know you're very familiar with our document, so it's slightly different than open space. It's in Article 5 in this document. Civic spaces are defined as a green, a square, a plaza, a playground, a sport field, a community garden, a pocket park, and they have specific regulations for those. And those are required in any development of any lots, like a subdivision that has lots that are less than an acre. And they have to have a civic space within 800 feet of a residence. So they would have to have several different pocket parks or play areas for children to be able to play within. So outside of that, they still have to have their stormwater detention areas and their open space, their buffers and different things along those lines. But specific to civic space, I think, is what your question was.
It wouldn't preclude additional open space that's not one of these civic space types. So it's, if you wanted to, the developer wanted to have, build in a greenway, that might be a thing, even if it's not one of these types. The green probably, or the natural, the natural civic space could be also used, but it could also just be undesignated open space.
I'll add too that the idea of civic space is to create more intentional open spaces rather than it being an afterthought where you have a subdivision and then there's just some kind of green space on the outskirts or maybe just like a area of green in the middle. So that's why we have those different types and sizes and what facilities may be appropriate in those. And so they're pretty well spelled out.
Jumping back to like the density slide that was just up, 8 units per acre is a pretty low density. Is that encouraging mixed use development of any kind, or is that more encouraging additional sprawl and taking away from our green spaces that way?
Looking back historically through the city, we have had a lot of projects that have been approved for RM8, which is 8 units per acre. Looking as we're going through this draft, most of those developments based on total land are only actually putting about 6.5 units per acre on there, mainly due to topography and a bunch of challenges that we're having. There are a few that are putting more, they've gotten zoned to RM12, or we have a couple RM20s that are zoned out here. During our discussion as the development review committee, this slide is slightly inaccurate. In the public draft, we did change it for CD4, drop down to 6 dwelling units per acre. And that is a density calculation based on total acreage of the land. So it's not, the building doesn't just have to have 6 units in it. It's based on the total density calculation. And then CD4C, which as Anna stated earlier, is primarily out by the interstate. Today in our zoning, in the proposed zoning map, it is exclusively by I-40 and Highway 96. And that moves up to 12 units per acre, which would encourage higher density living closest to the interstate, closest proximity to Nashville.
Thank you. And then for the height, was that measured in stories or is that in additional measurement of feet? Because some building can be 2 stories, but it's significantly taller than others.
It is measured in stories, but we also have a ceiling height requirement, so that will obviously influence how tall the story ends up being. Is there anything you want to add?
No, that's correct.
For
For the flood zone overlay, I know you mentioned it was based on FEMA. Some of those flood zone maps can be very outdated, especially with any new development and the increase in impervious surfaces. So did you make any consideration? Is there any provisions in there that state when it should be reviewed or considered, or was there considerations when making the zoning recommendations where flood zone could increase based on the zoning recommendations for upstream?
We haven't tried to adjust the flood zone elevations. There are a lot of things that could happen, but it's very difficult to code to what could happen. Clearly, all around the country, you're having more inundating rains and things that didn't used to flood or flooding. And so that'd be a thing I think that the city, ought to look at as a thing, whether or not they want to do another flood study or whether it's they'd rather just let it be, but it's not being changed here. I'll say that FEMA, I did some zoning work down in Gulfport and Biloxi after Hurricane Katrina, and all the flood zones down there were changed after that, and they were changed because FEMA required them to be. And so that's another possibility that FEMA may actually say, guys, we know this is what we approved a long time ago, but it's different now. So,
is there a plan to reserve space for bypass roads off of 196?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Is there a plan to reserve areas for a bypass road off 196 to alleviate traffic?
That's not in the zoning ordinance. It's probably in your major thoroughfare plan, though. If there is one that does that. I don't know whether it does or not.
So it's, I encourage you to come out Saturday morning and listen to the strategic planning session with the Board of Commissioners. We will be talking, in one of the items that I've got from our planning department is to update our major thoroughfare plan, and in that we will be looking at potentially a bypass option from Highway 96 to Highway 100. That will be discussed as a community, not on Saturday morning, but as we get into the major thoroughfare planning items, probably about this time next year. So I encourage you to stay tuned and come back out.
I stole the mic again. Not as much a question as comment and appreciation. Looking at the dwelling units per acre max, the RM20 as we currently have is extremely dense, and seeing that be reduced for Fairview, I think really shows what the character and the desire is for out here not having that high density. So thanks to staff as well as the team for reducing that max down in hopes that it keeps Fairview at least a little bit more rural in the highest density areas.
One thing I failed to mention too with the building types is that the largest multifamily building type we have, we call a small multifamily. There it is. So right here. And I believe it's 8 units per building. It's not in there.
Oh, it's not in there.
But
you don't have that one up there.
No, I don't. But the reason I say that is because in some cities we'll also have a large multifamily building, but we just didn't feel like that was appropriate in Fairview. I think it can go up to like 24 units per building, and that didn't sound like something that the city wanted. So the biggest we have is a small multifamily building.
Anybody else?
You have included some lovely drawings in these that we've seen, but is there any, do you have anything that kind of like maybe links to the real world examples of what already exists in Fairview as an example of one of these things? or in Williamson County or any kind of nearby areas as people are reviewing this? So we can do like a street view type look possibly, where we might have been there, just to kind of do an example from a drawing or to real world.
Did you hear it? Enough to answer? I couldn't hear it.
Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
So as people are reviewing this, and there are some lovely drawings in here for examples of it, but do you have any references while we're reviewing for where these things exist in the real world, kind of maybe in Fairview, Williamson County, or surrounding areas, so that you get like a street, maybe do Google Street View to see those real things, or maybe we have driven past them and say, oh, they know what they mean by that kind of real world examples.
My first comment would be is that we tried to customize the ordinance or the code to Fairview. And so when we had the Codapalooza, the planners had Fairview in their mind when they're doing all of that. And then I guess the second thing, there are certain parts of the transect that you would see familiar features in Franklin, in Nolensville, in Gallatin. There's kind of a typical development pattern that has happened in Middle Tennessee that, all the way back, based on a long time ago, and those are still largely the development patterns that are there. If you go particularly to some of the older areas in those cities, you'll start seeing exactly what this is talking about. There you go. Shall I say that? On this, we just now looked up the small multifamily building, and it's 6 units. It's not 8, and it's certainly not 24.
Any other questions for tonight?
One last, the advisory board, when y'all was putting this together in the last 10 months, 11 months, who all was asked, besides y'all and the city, who all was in on this?
The advisory board was put together by myself and our staff in the Planning and Codes Department. We sought guidance from myself, our city engineer consultant, our city planner consultant, Will Owen, who is a city engineering consultant with Griggs Maloney. The mayor sits on that as an elected official, and also because she sits on the Planning Commission and on the Board of Commissioners. We have Brandon Butler sits on there as a member of the community who has a significant experience being on the Planning Commission for, what were you on the Planning Commission for, Brandon? A decade longer? So he is well-versed in understanding our current ordinance and our issues that we have with our current ordinance and looking at the future. Tim Ingram sits on there as a developer and builder within the city of Fairview. And then Dave McGowan Jr. also is part of that review committee. He is a part of Regent Homes. They utilize these form-based codes, hybrid codes in Columbia, in Nolensville, and then surrounding communities as an outsider who's also doing business in the city of Fairview. Was put on there, and that is it as far as our in-house review committee. That committee was put together by myself and our staff in the Planning and Codes Department just to give us a couple extra people to bounce some ideas off of, and then to have some folks who could communicate back and forth with board members and give everybody a couple other people to talk to other than just myself as as our few-man team down there in the Planning and Codes office.
Everybody on the planning commission board on this, or just?
No, the only elected official or appointed official on the planning, on the review committee was the mayor. And that was just due to help make things a little simpler. If you have more than one appointed member or elected member who will be voting on this, discussing it at the same time, that requires public notification, that requires it to be a public meeting, to be recorded, to be put out, to have the work sessions that we need to be able to do. We functionally don't have that time nor space with our city hall, with all of the events and different departments that utilize this space on a weekly basis.
And all that said, everything that's been done thus far in terms of outreach and in terms of committees and the Codapalooza and all of that those are all steps that are not customarily done at all by a city. That is to have additional explanation, additional input, additional expertise brought into it, because the Planning Commission still has to review this. And then if they say yay, then the elected officials have to still say yay. And so those are the only two things that had to be done. All of this process is outreach, get you guys to have a chance to weigh in, and trying to just get it exactly right. So,
Just when we had asked this question before, it was at the planning commission, and it didn't sound like anybody but one person was from the planning commission. So that's kind of, it was, I know you weren't in all the meetings, but that's kind of what was said.
yeah.
I appreciate developers in real estate being on it in one hand. The other hand, it's like, okay, they got a vested interest in it also. So, you know.
Yeah.
They do have a vested interest, Ms. Cook, but they also are the people who utilize these codes in every community as well. They have the most knowledge in doing it. I think that, I don't know, some of you probably disagree with me. I don't think I'm very developer friendly. These two would probably say, if you read through this, there's a lot of rules and regulations that we put into it that are not developer friendly at all. I told them before the meeting, I said, I love to put as much in there as we can, and then we'll see what people scream about, and then we'll start, pull it back if we have to. But I think that we should build the best Fairview that we can and have the most regulations that we need to build the best city that we can. So I'm from here, born and raised. I have kids here. I want the community to continue to grow and be the best place that I grew up and that I can raise my kids. So that's where I come at it from. If it takes a couple more regulations to make sure that we get things exactly how we want it, I don't have any issue with that. That's correct. They only talk to me, and then I talk to the committee to bounce ideas off.
One of the things that we've said over and over while we were working on this project, Anna and I, is that when we ask Ethan something, we know it's informed because he's got an incredibly practical approach to everything that he tells us. And that cannot be said for all planning staffs all around the country, I promise you. Some of them don't have the background even to have that kind of expertise put onto it. So, and I'm a lawyer by training, and one of the things that I've always done the entire time I've practiced law, and I'm not really practicing law here, but it's just this is a legal document still, but I always tried when I delivered a document to a client to be a document that client would be willing to be either the client or the opposite party So always try to have it reasonable. Don't go crazy asking for too much. Don't make it too rigorous. Because you can also like squash out development if you go at it too hard. But just the idea that what we handed to them was what I think is a reasonable way to regulate down here, and I wouldn't have done it another way. So.
Kind of jumping back to the timeline, so there's a 30-day public comment period. Is there going to be another public hearing in which we'll kind of be able to have a community feel for that distribution of public comment? Because otherwise we won't really know what everyone else is saying, and if we support something else somebody else is saying, that might be an opportunity for some more community input. Or is it going straight to a voting meeting?
Public hearing at that level.
Yeah. So I will, we're planning on having a work session prior to the Planning Commission meeting in September over this document, it's on September 9th, so it'll be during the public comment period. That work session, I told them last night at the Planning Commission, I said, let y'all see what the document looks like, and then you tell me if you think it needs to be an hour long or 2 hours long. It's 476 pages, so it's probably going to be a 2-hour long work session to go over any main items that they have to address. Of course, we'll be going through it and giving me comments as well. Post that, there will be another work session at the October Planning Commission over the draft as well. If we have a final draft at that point, the Planning Commission likely will take it up on the October meeting, which is October 14th, I believe. Don't quote me on it. If not, it'll likely be in November that we take it to the Planning Commission. Subsequently, it'll go to the Board of Commissioners. There will be a public hearing at the Board of Commissioners prior to the second and final reading of that. So this 30-day window, if you are seeking to, as a citizen of Fairview, put your input and put your comments in, this 30-day window is your opportunity to give your public comment. The review committee will be reviewing every comment that comes in. We will filter anything that is completely in left field, and then we'll give all of the great ideas that y'all come up with to TPUDC. Yes, Ms. Cook.
Where she's going. It's kind of once all the new stuff, if anything changes, is there any way to put a PDF in and maybe put red what changed, or I don't know, something, so we can just kind of see. After we read 470 something pages, I'd rather go get the red or purple or whatever you decide. But yeah, it would be nice if we saw it before they voted it all in.
I guess there could be well, first, it's not scoped for us to do that. I'll just say that on the front end because it's a good bit of work. But it's possible for us to show it in PDF form. Once we get a revision in, I guess that could be created, but it is really time consuming.
If it's something you add, you'd have to add it in this document, right?
No, it's not. This isn't like a Word document. It's a different kind of software entirely. So you add it to the document, but it doesn't distinguish between something that you added today and what you added yesterday, and so it's just not that kind of software.
But you're able to bold things, but you can't make.
I'm sorry.
You're able to bold stuff, but you can't make a font color.
You can, but it depending on the number of changes there are. It could be a tremendous number of changes like that, and every one of them's a separate keystroke. So,
I've done projects with hundreds of.
No, I know. No, I always wonder the same thing. Actually, it's like, why don't they at least do what Word will do? So.
Okay, Ethan, can you just clarify? You said 476.
Yes, and it's not the longest code we've ever written.
Well, I just want to know how much paper I got to put in my printer tomorrow morning.
Approximately one ream.
It is 476 pages from front to back. Our current code is 461, so we did add a couple extra additional pages to this.
Look at all the illustrations we added. But you can print it on two-sided, remember that. And so you'd be using only half the trees.
As soon as I just got this document at 6:05 tonight, so as soon as I get through it, I've got a couple things that they've asked me to look at and get back to them, and then they're gonna give me a updated copy, and then we will have a printed copy down at the Planning and Codes office. If anyone wants to come and flip through it, sit down with me, we can go through it all. Correct. There will be a public hearing prior to the second reading at the Board of Commissioners. Any other questions? Before you leave, if you didn't, hopefully Rachel or Marissa caught you coming in, please take a look at the 3 sign options for the City of Fairview signs that are in the back and cast your vote. And thank you for coming out tonight. We do have our strategic planning session on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. If you would like to give any citizens' comments about what you feel should be the plan for the City of Fairview, citizens' comments begin at 8:05 a.m. on Saturday morning. Thank you all. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.